Okay, so let's move on just a little. I think so. They're talking about the cultural othering that's happening of what they're calling white evangelicals, how they their beliefs and practices place them on the outside of normal and acceptable society, how their way of thinking in life offends the sensibilities and ideals of mainstream culture in America. And so here we go. This is another part from the paper they're quoting. On theological and philosophical grounds alone, evangelicalism today finds itself outside of the mainstream of the contemporary world. But the more political power the evangelical movement has sought to wield, and the more the evangelical movement has aligned itself with the politics and practices of the political right, the more its reputation has been diminished. Right. So this is very clearly saying, you guys vote the wrong way. You guys vote for, on average, you guys are voting for Republicans, and Republicans are evil. Like, isn't that what
absolutely.
this is saying?
Yeah, I mean, again, this guy is just, to him, the world of ideas is a popularity contest like junior high school. That's his level of thinking is what's popular.
It's so weird because I'm like, what's wrong with voting Republican?
Yeah.
I mean, how's it any different than, like, I don't find anything inherently wrong with voting Republican or Democrat. I think everybody has different reasons why they're choosing the candidate they choose. As you know, I'm a lifetime Democrat who voted Republican this time because my reason is because the Democratic Party I don't think is liberal anymore. I mean, I hope one day they come back to liberalism, but currently they're authoritarians. So, but I have friends who voted Democrat. Like, I'm not, you guys are voting the wrong way and your reputation has been diminished. Like, there's something, he's coming at this from a perspective as if we all agree that voting for the right is wrong.
It's interesting that because what I'm seeing here is an admission that society has used social pressure and manipulation techniques to make a certain group of people uncool. That's all I'm seeing. Hey, we made these guys uncool, so, maybe they should stop.
Yeah, you guys are still voting for the uncool party.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So then they go on to show some of the data from the study.
Okay.
And he says the gap between white evangelicals and the rest of America. He's really trying to isolate white evangelicals here, not just evangelicals. And the rest of America, the biggest gap is on matters of race. And so he shows this graph, and it says the numbers are just immense. Moreover, concerns about racism are no mere side issue in the survey. They represented the top political concern of progressive partisans. Okay, that means they're not the top. That means they're just the top for progressives. Look at this graph. And so we know where David French sides on this. David French is over on the left side somewhere.
But can I just, again, I'm just going to point this out. Whenever you see graphs like this, these graphs are built by pragmatists. This is pragmatism expressed graphically. Here's all the different beliefs. Here's the universe of current beliefs on some scale. I'm going to divide a line and declare that things on this side are this and things on that side are that. That's a principleless. There's no principles involved in this graph. Zero. There is no principled thinking. These could all be right-wing positions. He could just label them that way. They could all be left-wing positions. There's no principles here. This is just these people think this way and these people think this way, and we're going to divide it here. There's no principles related to this at all. At all. So whenever you see these graphs, there's a few exceptions where they have like that little libertarian test where you take things and I believe in this and I believe in that. Those are principle-based questions. And so you end up on a graph somewhere. But whenever they do these kind of things with like these kind of issues, and then they try and draw like, oh, here's how we've moved to the left, or here's how we've moved to the right, or here's how society has changed. Those are all arbitrary, and they have nothing to do with principles at all. Zero. This is how a pragmatist views the world. And they view the mean as some sort of, they worship the mean mathematically. It's a weird, weird thing. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Oh, you're fine. Look at some of the stuff on, okay, so this is a graph of extremely, at the top we have, these are things you consider to be an extremely serious threat. And as you approach the bottom,
right.
As you approach the bottom, things that are not a serious threat, right? And then we have, for anybody listening, on the right, you've got conservative partisan, and on the left, you've got progressive partisan. And then you have all these issues, and they're plotted in here in different places. So, for example, at the top, near extremely serious threat, you can see political polarization and divisiveness is in the middle, and it's at the top, meaning it's something that both so-called conservative partisans and progressive partisans both agree that that's an extremely serious threat. But then you've got some differences. So at the very top, on the left side, on the progressive side, you've got racism, unequal treatment of whites and blacks. That's not on the right side. At the top of the right side, in terms of serious threats, you've got media distortions and fake news. And then you've got China as a close second. I kind of agree with the right side.
Sure. Sure.
Right? Okay. What's wrong with this so far? I would also say that racism and unequal treatment is becoming a very serious threat. Because of things like critical race theory, because of the racism that's being pushed by the authoritarian left. I think unfortunately it's something that, in decades past, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, wouldn't have been as high up as it is now. And I am a little surprised I don't see it on the right side, just even if they mean something different. But he lays all this out. So he basically says, his argument is that, look, the progressives recognize that racism is a big problem. And I'm taking as a presupposition that we all agree it's a big problem. Therefore, the conservatives are wrong. Like, but he doesn't actually offer anything to say why. Why is that right? Why is that correct? That your perception, why is it correct to have a perception that that's the biggest problem?
Right, because he's writing from this blue pool.
Yeah, because he's writing from over there, as if we all agree on these things.
Yeah,
that really bothers me.
Of course, yeah, yeah.
So then he says, when you drill down into the numbers, look at these numbers. Percent of people that see racism as a very serious threat, and he says in this study, African American, 86% said they do see it as a serious threat. 70% of Hispanics, 68% of white non-evangelicals. So that's white people who are not evangelicals. But then look at these evil white evangelical Protestants. Only 36% of them think racism's a problem, guys. These guys are bad, right? Like that's what he's trying to show you with this.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a popularity contest.
Yeah.
Look, the popular opinion is this, and these people have a different than the popular opinion. And by the way, if you're talking about David French, popular should be in quotes. This is popular among media elites because I don't know much about him, but he's definitely part of the cathedral. So there you go.
He goes on to show other graphs where white evangelicals have a greater percentage of white evangelicals support the child separation policy, for example. But he just sort of skims over the fact that Muslims are pretty close behind white evangelicals. I mean, that's not worth mentioning, right? Or
and
Mormons or he's just sort of trying to say it's just this white evangelical thing. And then
actually, wait, can I pause on this one? This is interesting to me. This is fascinating to me as an atheist, right? Look, the non-religious, these are all religions at the top. The atheists and agnostics are at the bottom. They are at the very bottom. This graph shows to me the difference between having a religion and having the kind of de facto state theism that passes as atheism in society right now. That's this difference. That's this difference. It's not. This is not white. I don't see white evangelical versus everyone else. I look at this and I go, oh, clearly the extent to which you're religious matters.
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
On this, that's what it means.
And you can say that without even taking a policy position. And he's writing this from the perspective of there's no way to be for the separation policy without being immoral. But I've heard people make arguments on behalf of the separation policy that were not immoral, that they gave their reasoning why. Yep. Because if you are separate children from their parents, and parents can be prosecuted, right? They were separating them because if they're holding the adult in a cell,
prison, right? In
prison, they necessarily have to separate the child unless they're going to put them in prison. I can see people having a moral position on both sides of this question. So the way that he presents it as if the moral argument is only on one, and you must answer this way to be moral, I just don't agree with that.
Right. I mean, replace the word illegal entry into the U.S. with murder. Separate children from their parents when parents can be prosecuted for murder. Well, yeah, actually.
Yeah, you're not going to go to jail
do that.
With your parent.
We're not going to cry about kids in cages when that happens. So this is this is an emotional question as well, because the question really is, should illegal entry into the U.S. be a crime? That's the question. But what they've done is emotionalize it by saying, should children be separated? Well, look, if it's a crime, then they get separated. That's the question.
And that bears out in the next graph, which is it says that they support reducing even legal immigration by 50%, even legal. So the question is, would you support reducing legal immigration by 50%? And they show, look, white evangelicals, 55% of white evangelicals said they would support reducing legal immigration by 50%. Orthodox are 52%, white Catholic 49%, Hindu 41%. And it goes on down till at the bottom, again, you have agnostics and atheists at around 13%.
But the atheists win this time. We're at the very bottom.
So these graphs, I think, are only... Looking at this,
can I ask you a question about this?
What? Yeah.
Sorry. Is he saying that reducing legal immigration is some sort of racist position?
Yes, that's what I was about to say. So you would only look at this and say, "Oh, look, white evangelicals are immoral." If you believe that reducing legal immigration itself is immoral, you have to agree with his presuppositions to even come away with the opinions that he has, because he doesn't support them with arguments. There's no argument in this paper nothing in this article explains why he thinks it's immoral to have any of these positions. He just takes it on faith that we all recognize that these are immoral positions to have. And look, the white evangelicals have more of them. But he doesn't ever explain it. And then he goes on and he finishes it out with a big, here we go. He's basically saying, okay, again, it's worth emphasizing that many white evangelical political positions on matters of immense importance to many millions of Americans do not flow naturally from evangelical biblical orthodoxy. Well, okay, he also doesn't prove that. He just says things like that in this essay, and he doesn't explain what he means. I was going to
say, he didn't attack that argument at all. He didn't do anything.
No, he didn't.
No.
There isn't a straight line from Scripture to severe immigration restrictions, for example, or from Scripture to confidence in American police. But you didn't explore any of that in this article. You didn't ask where could this be coming from. And
based on this article, there might be. I mean, look, based on this article, there may as well be a verse in the Bible that says immigration should be restricted in the United States in the year 2020, and we wouldn't know because he didn't bother to even try and make a biblical argument for anything.
He didn't. And then he says, instead, the political gaps between white evangelicals and the rest of America flow from a series of historical, cultural, and ideological commitments that are contestable at best and unjust at worst.
What does he mean by that?
Again, well, who knows, because he didn't argue. He didn't make any arguments. And then he says Christians should defend religious liberty. They should defend life. But they should not even begin to presume that their ongoing othering in American society is a product of their virtue. Sometimes the world rejects Christians because it rejects Christ. Sometimes, however, the world rejects Christians because Christians are cruel. In that case, alienation isn't persecution. It represents righteous judgment for our own political sin. Now, look how he puts himself in the title. He said us. And then at the very last sentence, he says our own. He puts himself in both of these things. Why? Why? Because he's certainly
so he can attack it.
Yes. He's certainly othered himself from this group. He's certainly saying, I don't agree with any of these things. But then he puts himself in there for the group judgment.
I like this phrase political sin as well. This is an interesting one, right?
Our political sin.
Because there is nothing, there's no such thing, really. That's not a thing in Christian theology.
Yeah.
Political sin.
So according to him, political sin is just voting for a Republican? Is that the takeaway here? Voting for Republican is bad and immoral. So say I, David French, and it's not based in the Bible. So say I, David French, and therefore you guys are all guilty, but I'm going to say we. So it seems like I'm judging myself, but I'm not. But I'm judging you because I'm not like you because I'm good.
Exactly that. Exactly that. David French. Now I'll remember who David French is.
Yes.
He has a PhD in ad hominem and rhetoric, apparently. Look.
And again, you don't even have to agree with these positions that that the large percentage of white evangelicals are supporting. You don't have to even agree with those.
No, you don't.
To find what he's doing to be sort of dishonest. And I just found it as really dishonest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to throw out one thing because it needs to be said. I hate whenever anyone brings this up with immigration. So you don't have to agree with this moral argument, but you got to understand restricting immigration can have nothing to do with race. Nothing to do with race. There is a valid concern that many people have based on the following facts. One, the U.S. is the most free, has been the most free, and has the best constitution of any government in history. It is most focused on individual rights, and those rights have been slipping. The government has been expanding and violating those rights to a greater degree, increasing its own debt, and basically driving itself into bankruptcy and socialism. 1. 2, we are in a system where voting is the primary method by which government expands and we get less freedom and fewer rights are protected. We're also in a system where we have a huge social safety net. A huge social safety net. So it is perfectly rational to say, well, look, we got to get rid of the social safety net before we can let other people come in because that costs money. And I'm particularly concerned about the beliefs of the people coming in, not their race. I'm particularly concerned about their valuing of freedom, liberty, individual rights, small government, the things that make this country unique. And to the extent that we are if we were importing a bunch of libertarians, the left would be all about the wall. The left would be all about building a wall. They are happy to have immigration specifically because they believe it will help push the country in the direction they want. This is not an argument about race.
Entirely right. I mean, the thing is, a lot of immigrants do care about individualism and individual rights. That
depends where they're from, but I think they are largely correct.
Right.
They're not completely correct.
Even the New York Times ran an article that says, this was today, immigrant neighborhoods shifted red as the country chose blue. That's the headline in the New York Times. And it goes on to say, across the U.S., many areas with large populations of Latinos and residents of Asian descent, including ones with the highest number of immigrants, had something in common this election: a surge in turnout and a shift to the right, often a sizable one. So his whole
right doesn't mean freedom. So.
No, but I'm saying his whole freaking article was about how white evangelicals don't vote the way that is positive for immigrants. Well, hey, guess what, David French? The New York Times today is talking about how immigrants voted with those white evangelicals. Immigrants shifted to where those white evangelicals are. How is that?
Some,
how do you
I
explain
think,
that?
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, though, on average, immigrants do pull the donkey lever more than they vote Republican. Like that's true. Not immigrants from Cuba. Like it depends on where they're from. It like obviously depends on their ideology. I do think there will be a shift because the Democratic Party has abandoned actually any sort of working person unless they're focused on race. You know, they've become the elitist SJW party. So there is an opportunity to pick up immigrants who just want, you know, jobs and a better economy. Like, so maybe the Republicans will pick up some more immigrants. But my point isn't necessarily to say whether that's true or false. My point is the left believes that immigration will help them. So far it has. Maybe that will not continue, but they believe it will help them. And the reason that they're pro-immigration has nothing to do with their supposed bleeding hearts or kids in cages or they care about XYZ or blah, 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 because they're happy to tell Trump he's got to go bomb Assad because of whatever and bomb innocent people in the Middle East. They don't give a crap about people. What they care about is power. And they believe immigration is a great way to solidify their stranglehold on the Constitution and to destroy the United States. They believe that whether it's true or not, that's what they believe. That's why they're pro-immigration. And I'll say again, if it was a bunch of libertarians, if it was a bunch of evangelicals immigrating to the US, they would be, Pelosi would be, AOC would be, we need a border wall, we need a wall, no immigration, blah, blah, blah. It would be completely different. It would be night and day. And they would be making all these arguments based on SJW ideology of why we can't have immigrants. The poor minorities here and the black people have this problem and there's going to undercut that. It's going to hurt this community. They would say anything to stop immigration if they believed immigration would halt the progress of their political agenda. That's all this is about. This has nothing to do with kids in cages or anything else. And David French is just a tool. He's just a tool. He's a pragmatist tool who's trying to be popular. That's what he's trying to do. He's a loser. He's a loser who's trying to be popular. He has no principles. He can't think for himself. He looks at some graphs about what's cool and like, what article can I write that'll get me invited to the next cocktail party as soon as we're allowed to go outside? That's what he's doing.
That's the impression I got.
Absolutely.
Anyway, he's like, I'll be your token white evangelical who hates Trump and puts other white evangelicals down. I don't know.
Sure. That's what he is.
Well, thanks for indulging me. I had some issues with that. I was reading it like, who are you? But I appreciate you giving me your feedback.
Who he is. That's who he is.